Hi, I'm Dwayne of Revelation Cable Company, and this is the Beer and Gear Show, where we drink beer and talk about gear. Today we have Bryan Sours of Soursound in Portland. Welcome, Bryan.
Hi, thanks. Glad to be here. Well,
Yeah.
I'm usually here. Glad that you're here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you letting me join your shop for a day or a couple hours. Well, I think we'll just start off with the beers. We got a couple interesting named beers. One is, I've heard a couple different ways of pronouncing it. Prime, something like that.
I've never heard either one of those, but close enough.
Which
This is where the fact checker is yelling at you how you're
Right.
supposed to say it.
So yeah, what was your pronunciation?
PFriem, I've heard.
Pfriem?
I swear I've heard somebody say pFriem, which I think is kind of odd. But and if I remember correctly, they are local.
Right.
Yeah, they have a lager that's really good.
Okay. Well, this is the Hazy IPA, and then you have the West Coast.
Good luck with this one. The West Coast Grocery Company Peck Chillzner. Hey,
You did it.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Cheers.
Yeah.
It's good. Well, I appreciate you drinking some beers today because I know that you haven't had any in a while.
Yeah, but this one's really good.
Yeah. Awesome. I think the first time I heard about you is I was passing through Seattle and I happened to see one of your amps, the one that you had built for the Shins.
For Dave, yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, this thing's super unique. I hadn't seen anything like it before. And then at the same time, I had emailed John from Electronic Audio Experiments asking him who the person to talk to in Portland was. And he gave me your name.
Yeah, I don't know why.
So I got in touch, and it was too late to shoot this the first time around. But I was super impressed with your knowledge and all the kind of crazy amount of repair stuff that you have in here.
Lots of stuff, yes.
Right. And so I figured, we definitely needed to come back and
I appreciate
share one
that.
of
Glad
these.
you're here.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about some of the stuff you built? Because I know you've built for Modest Mouse, the Shins, Helio Sequence, which those were probably all one-offs, correct?
Yeah, all that. Well, yeah, Isaac had an amp that was part of a run, which this amp was a part of that same run. And then I think Modest Mouse did like a couple weeks, and that it was the time when they did a couple Coachella shows, and it didn't have enough headroom. It was a 50 or 75 watt amp. The guy needs a lot louder than that. So he came back, and we basically built the next run, which was the larger wattage amps, around his requirements. And honestly, the fact that he had done that tour, loved the sound of it, but needed more headroom.
Right. So how many watts did you end up doing?
That amp was 150, but then had a low power mode where power supply voltage would go down, and there was a bias adjustment for that mode as well, where basically it'd go down to about 110. So I think he ran it like 110, and then they had the like clear sound wall because everyone else was like, "You're too damn loud. You're too damn loud." So, and he's like, I just want to feel it. And that's the thing. That was the cool thing about that. You get a big amp like that, whole bunch of speakers, you hit a note, you're going to feel it.
For sure. And I mean, that's what you want when you play
And
guitar.
yeah, that's definitely how he is as a player. Like, he wants to feel the stage move with him.
Yeah.
So,
which is kind of crazy because now the big thing in the world is using in-ear monitors, which...
I remember, this was a while ago, but I remember when the band... definitely was quite a while ago, but I remember when the band actually switched over to in-ears, and everyone was like, "Hey, you should use in-ears," and he was like, "Nope." And so he was pretty dedicated to staying to floor wedges, because again, you just crank those things, and he can not only feel what he's doing, but he can feel everything else. And it's at the end of the day, it's about what the musician's going to do on stage and what the performance is.
Yeah.
So
I think sometimes when you're feeling it, it kind of makes you perform better.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, he's a really energetic guy, and if he's not feeling it,
it's different kind of thing. So when I came here, the two things that I tried were the $100 boost and this amp here. Why don't we start with the $100 boost? Because I think that's the one piece of equipment that people can get.
One thing anybody can get right now.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So, I mean, where did this come about?
So it was something that I designed and did a small run of a little more than 10 years ago now. And it's kind of odd. Like, it was basically started off as just I wanted to learn how to work more with FETs, doing design work at the time. And so that's kind of what I came up with, and did a lot of power supply experimentation, figured out, increasing power supply voltage, what does that do to this circuit? Hey, it sounds better. Hey, it's got more headroom. Hey, it's got more level, and kind of designed it from a tube amp guy point of view, trying to, get into doing solid state discrete design. And the power supply design is really kind of what made it work right. It's a very simple, honestly, it's a lot like the front end of a guitar amp, of a tube amp. But with this power supply, you're able to get a lot more level out of it, a lot more swing. And so I was able to kind of voice this singular stage with this bigger power supply to get the sound that I wanted out of it. And I was looking around, I think there was, probably shouldn't say exactly which companies, but there was several, $200 to $300 really low parts count, very simple boost pedals on the market that a lot of people were buying and spending a lot of money on. And I was kind of like, having a boost pedal with a tube amp just seems like a natural combination. I want to play at this volume, and then I want to play at this volume, and I want to hit a button, and I want to get there right now, and then go back. It seemed just to work. Yet people are spending $300 on this stuff that is super cheap to make. Not that this is really expensive. It's very difficult to make. No, but seriously, like, it was just, I didn't understand it. You know what I mean? And custom paint jobs and stuff, I get it. Some people are into that. I was just more into the idea of making something that sounded different and was better to me. I'm not going to say something I do is better than something else that somebody else does, but I won't get in trouble with that. But it was better to me from a design point of view,
right.
And it really should be $100. I mean, this thing should be $100. Okay, it's $100, and Modest Mouse bought a lot of them. I forget how many I did. I don't know, like 25 or 30 of them, and I sold them all out really, really fast. And I pretty much lost money on it. It didn't really go so well financially. So, a lot of people over the years had asked me about it. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Do it again. And, I was just never in a situation where I could actually sit down and build these things and not go broke doing it.
Right.
Fast forward to, what we've got going on now in manufacturing, surface mount technology, even through-hole automated population. Now manufacturing is at a state where I can design something more complex than you think it is, from a circuit point of view, which it is, especially with the power supply, and have parts of it manufactured for me affordably enough to where I can still actually hit the price point. And even better, I can make a lot of them. And that was the whole thing, was like, damn, this thing's pretty good. Let's keep it $100 and let's build a lot of them and see what happens. And there definitely was a long time of re-engineering and redesign to try to get the thing to sound better than it did before, have lower noise than it did before, have more output, and just do what it does better and add some other functionality, the momentary switching, the relay stuff, and John actually, who introduced you to me, helped me with that. And yeah, end result is something that still costs $100, and we can actually make a lot of them. So,
well, I love the momentary switch. It's just it's a great idea for compositional work. Like if you want to kind of do these like punch-ins and stuff, with volume increase, it's great.
Yeah, I just thought of it as like a solo thing. Stomp on it, get really wanky, and then let go and go back to rhythm. That's all I really thought of. And other people, a friend of mine got one of the earlier ones, and he was like telling me how he uses it as like an instant feedback box. Like he basically just like walks back to his amp, holds on the button, goes like this, all Sonic Youth, and then lets off the button and goes right back to whatever,
That's
I'm
great.
like, oh, okay, that's a different way to do it. Hell, good for you. Cool, So it's just an idea, and it's cool to see what other people do with it from a musical, compositional, as you put it, standpoint.
And so it's a kind of standard 9-volt power supply, but it's boosting to how?
Yeah, 30. Where did it end up at? 32, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And does that just give you more headroom, or what's the?
Because of how the gain block is designed, it's kind of at a fixed gain, and then when you increase the power supply voltage, you're just getting more of whatever that fixed gain point is. So as much as the power supply voltage is part of internal headroom, it's part of how it sounds. It really functions the way it does because of the power supply. Like if it was just a 9-volt box, it would have less output and it would sound very different. I mean, the power supply, honestly, is really what the heart of that thing is.
Right.
I mean, the gain block is a simple gain block, but the power supply is where the real cool stuff happens.
Okay. So the next thing, I tried this SS15 and I was blown away. I mean, I thought it sounded amazing. Especially with the $100 boost on top of it.
They do work really well together.
Explain, how this came about, the build process.
Kind of a long story. I think I started that actually in my old shop, and I've been here now for 3.5 years. But a couple people had kind of been pushing me to do a lower wattage combo for a while, and I was still in this mode where I'm like, all I want to do is make 400 watt amps and just, make people deaf. It's fun. And, from a marketing, but like a market standpoint, this is more viable than something that's, 180 watt ear killer. So I got to a point where I had some ideas and I never really materialized any of them, or I never really actualized any of them. And Pete from the Dandy Warhols came in, and he was doing this big US tour and had a Premier Guitar rig rundown thing scheduled. And he wanted to kind of showcase a lot of the Portland builders. Myself, Saw Cole guitars, Spaceman pedals. And, he really wanted to just kind of bring the best of Portland into, his words, into the mix. And so he's like, hey, we really need to do a combo. And I'm like, well, I had a lot of ideas, I never really kind of put them to work. So then it started, and it took quite a while. Luckily, that tour got postponed once, because there was a point where I was like, I'm not going to make this. Yeah. There was supposed to be one with reverb as well. And, once the tremolo one really started coming alive, Pete decided he wanted to do 2 and do a dual tremolo where you engage them at the same time and offset the speeds. And the front of house guy puts him up in the mains. It's kind of like the guitar is moving across the stage, and it will kind of swirl around a lot. And there's a little bit in that rig rundown video out there where he does the stereo thing. And listening to it on a set of studio monitors, you can hear it, but in person, it's bizarre. It is really quite strange. It's really cool because the offset of the speeds really dictates how the stereo image is getting moved around, and it's pretty cool. But he did that tour actually with some prototypes, and this amp isn't that far from them as far as the circuit design, transformer design. The cabinet, though, is quite different, and that was one of those earlier ones where I was still really trying to figure out what the aesthetic voice of this thing was. Like, how is this thing going to look? And there was a lot of revisions, a lot of ideas, and I think I spent about 1.5 years really just trying different stuff. I mean, the handle alone was like 6 months. It was pretty funny because my girlfriend the whole time kept working on the handle. Oh, I'll try this, and I'll have this made. She's like, just put a handle on it, just get it done. And, she was right. She totally was right. But I'm really glad that we ended up with that handle design, because as much as it is a pain in the butt to make, it's kind of a focal point, And, there was a whole new logo that came around with this amp. And it was a lot of work, but I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things you told me is that you've had to experiment with different woods, where there were some things that you'd get and then you couldn't get again.
Yep.
Or some of them were too soft.
Yes, Pete's cabs were a. I had two different stocks of redwood, and one was an old growth redwood that, hard to say exactly, but it was definitely like the first major redwood growth. I don't know, 300 years or old or something. It was really cool stuff. Sounded great. Sounded awesome. Really unique sounding. And then I got some redwood that actually Pete preferred. That was early second growth, which is the stuff I grain matched it to what a lot of like the 50s Gibson stuff that I have in for repair. You know, I document just kind of what the grain looks like and go to wood shops and I ended up finding some of this stuff, and that stuff sounded totally different. You know, really round, really rich in the low mids. I mean, really great sounding wood, but so soft. And I mean, I think halfway through that tour, he sent me text messages like, "You gotta Tolex these things. This is bad.
Yeah.
Like they're just getting knocked around." I mean, they had their own flight cases and everything, still just got beat up. So when he came back, that's when, you know, aesthetic design round 2 started, and this is probably like round 6 or something. It was a lengthy experience.
I remember you explaining the handle to me and how many different hands are involved in getting this thing together.
Yes. So yeah, it's, you know, somebody does the flat stock, another company does the round stock, another company does the leather work, and then I assemble everything and then actually heat set in the logo with the silver foil. And then once all that's done, somebody else sews it together because my sewing skills are... No, I'm not going to sew anything on my guitar amps. No. And yeah, I mean, that's the final product. And it's pretty... It's a lot of stuff to get done just to make a handle. But I mean, it's kind of a focal point of the amp. So
that's great. And I think you mentioned something about how it's braced in...
the offset angle? Oh, the bracing.
Yeah, the offset as well as
the
bracing.
What you don't see is this 11 gauge stainless steel bracket that spans on the inside and basically makes it so that you know, you're never going to pull, because it's soft wood. This is pine, and so it's possible to pull that out of the wood. I mean, it's not exactly the lightest amp out there. So yeah, so there's that 11 gauge panel that's under there that spans grain, spans the width, and it just makes sure that you'll never yank that handle out. So at the end of your gig, when you're tired and you just want to go home and yell at your drummer over a text message, you can just yank that thing and it's not going to rip out of the cabinet.
Nice. And also you were saying that you've got it...
Yeah, the offset angle. I mean, I was doing the CAD work. I figure, how far can I take this thing? So yeah, the handle will stop at the point that it's at right now, which matches the same offset angle as the front of the cabinet itself. I mean, within reason. Yeah. Yeah, just those types of touches. That's just like the details I kind of geek out over.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, why buy a handle off the shelf when I can spend 6 months and way too much money making my own? You know.
Very nice.
So, I mean, why have transformers? I can make my own output transformer. You know?
Right.
So,
and that has your own output transformers. Very nice.
I mean, that's part of the sound.
Right.
You know, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like from a designer and a builder standpoint, it's this next step of being able to really dial in the sound I'm trying to go for. You know, you're trying to bring an idea and a creative feeling to life out of your brain and out of your ears, and you know, that's just one of those things that's like, why am I messing around with, you know, why am I not doing this myself? I can have, sure, the control aspects of it, that's great, but to be able to just say, you know what, I don't like the low end on that, or you know what, I don't like the top end on that. I can completely change how that interacts with the amp. I mean, it's rad. It's like a great level. It totally satiates my control issues. You know, it gives me the ability, like, no, I'm doing this. Yes, I'm doing that. Well, I'll just do 50 things in between to see what I really like. Yeah. You know, it's really stems from my control issues. Let's be real about this.
Well, I understand that feeling just from my own frustration trying to get other people to build things for me and having to get it revised and nope, do it again, do it again, do it again.
We probably buy 50 different types of cable and settle on like 5 of them that you actually like.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Totally get it.
Yeah, and then even then, there's a lot of throwaway where like there's some issues with it, and you gotta deal with that stuff. Like, I think you mentioned that you sort of use Gibson as some of those Gibson
Well,
GA amps.
I mean, with any amplifier design, from a player standpoint, you want to start with something, an idea, a baseline, at least for sonic goals. A lot of designers will just, copy a circuit and tweak it. I definitely don't do that. But, everyone's got to start with an idea of how something should sound. So for this one, the sonic goals were something in my mind that I couldn't quite quantify at the time, that was in between a late 50s Gibson GA40 versus meets an early 60s Vox AC15. And the idea being is, with the Gibson, a lot of low mids and a very full sounding amp, really great mid-range. Not exactly a ton of top end, but that mid-range that's just like classic, very 50s sort of American voicing in a guitar amp. But the Voxes have that thing where you can plug in a Les Paul, turn it up, bridge pickup, crank the treble, and that kind of kerrang that comes with it. That's a great sound. It's kind of hard to beat that, but they're not exactly the fullest sounding amp. So the idea was to create something that would have all those sonic varieties in between those things and still be able to achieve, in my mind, what was kind of like two ends of a spectrum. You know what I mean? It's got to have low end and it's got to have good low end, round, punchy, articulate low end. Can't flub out and fart around like crazy. Nobody likes that. Top end has to be sharp but smooth. And that's where, honestly, with the output transformer design, that's really what that allowed me to do. I could really change the top end. I mean, it's EL84s, but the output transformer doesn't have any interleaving, and it's more mid-range focused. But the cabinet is something it really has a lot of low end to it. So you get a lot of low frequency definition, but you're not really swamping the output stage of the amplifier. So, and same thing with the speaker. So, that's kind of like, a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And I mean, it's like a chef thing without getting too cheesy about it, but yeah. So
what speaker are you using there?
that has an Alnica Blue in it.
Okay. Very nice.
No other choices. Just an Alnica Blue. Oh, no, I'm really dead set on that. Trust me, I spent enough time. That's the best sounding speaker in there. There's no better sounding speaker in there. So I'm not going to build it for someone with some other speaker in it. That's the best one. Trust me. I spent the time. I know.
Right. So don't buy this amp and replace the speaker.
No, there's no external speaker jack. People laugh at me about this. And they should. I totally get it. But there's no external speaker jack. I don't want people running it on another cabinet or anything, because honestly, every aspect of that thing was tweaked and tweaked and tweaked again. And every single piece of that amp works together to make what you heard. I mean, that cabinet, a different amp in that cabinet would sound totally different. That amp on my 412 sounds totally different. And to create what that final piece, that final product was, is really just, it's all of that. I mean, I'd say it's the handle, but the handle's just place. But seriously though, it is every piece of that. And I think that, there's amp designers out there that understand that, and they're saying, that's the beauty of a combo amp. You get to dial in everything: the speaker, the cabinet, the tubes, the transfer, everything. It's all part of it. And I think that this is kind of my way of saying, this thing is this. It's a final thing. I mean, everything down to the stainless steel for the logo. It is what it is, and I don't want to necessarily make it something different for this or for that.
Right.
I mean, it does a lot, but
I think you had mentioned too that it's set up a certain way, but you can actually drop the gain. Is that what?
Yeah. So the sensitivity switch, the gain switch, it changes the phase inverter sensitivity. So if you think about a low wattage combo amp, it's something where the phase inverter and the output tubes are usually the first things to break up. The front end's not really breaking up, because with something low wattage, you don't really have a lot of stuff going on in the front end, generally speaking. So by reducing the input sensitivity to the phase inverter, you're just creating more headroom in the output section. So for, players that use a lot more pedals and get their sound more from their board, and they're wanting just kind of tone shaping and response shaping in a guitar amp, that's what that's for. And so Pete with the Dandies, for instance, he changes his pedal board or pedal boards and racks every tour. And I mean, he's known for creating, really unique sounds, and pedals are definitely a big part of that. And so that switch is something for him where, and players like that, not just for Pete, but, in that case, he's got a lot of different effects and a lot of things going on. Stereo effects, running dual mono sometimes, the tremolo offset stuff, all sorts of stuff. And that just gets him more scaling out of the volume control, more headroom out of the amp itself. And you can kind of dial in more where the tone controls sit. Because when you've got more headroom, you can kind of add more bass without distorting the output section. Add more treble without distorting the output section. So that's what that switch is for.
Right. So you did a short run of these.
Yes.
And are you planning on doing some more?
That's the plan. This year. I said that last year. But we're working towards it. We've got to get through one small run of the Lead 55 revision, which that'll kind of allow us the space and the time to dial in how we're doing turret boards for more than just 1 amp or more than just 5 amps. How we're going to do cab design in the shop, how we're going to do cab manufacturing in the shop. Because the last time somebody else did the cabinet work, somebody else did the Tolex work, and there's stuff about them that it didn't really work for me as a final product. And so after that, I decided I want to do it myself. I wanted every single one of them. I want to dial every aspect of it in and not rely on someone else's work or someone else's attention or maybe lack of attention to detail. So yeah, lots of jigs being made at this point, a lot of space. That whole space at the front of the shop is all just for Tolexing. It's a lot of work, but we'll get there. I'm definitely going to do it this year.
Sweet. Well, I look forward to seeing those come out.
Thanks.
And I would like to get one myself.
Definitely. Yep. I'll be here building. That's kind of what I do.
All right. So, second beer. You have the same one, the West Coast Grocery Company.
It's delicious. I wanted another one.
Yeah, it's great. I went with something different because I like variety. This is the Rosenstadt Bock. It's very dark amber, almost a stout-ish. Let's give it a try.
How is it?
It's wonderful. I like it. I'm a big fan of dark beers. I know you're not, but you're missing out. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into. So, how did you start out? Was it repairing?
I was in college, and I went to a college that was kind of like an accelerated program for recording engineering. And the whole thing was you were not supposed to have a job during it because you're going to school like on a 24-hour schedule. Like you'd have like a week where you'd go to school at, you'd have a lab from like 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. Really, no joke. It was pretty bizarre. And I got kind of bored. Yeah, kind of ADD. Like I like to do a lot of things. I like to have a little too much on my plate.
Yeah.
And I had a lab instructor who saw me trying to build a distortion pedal after a lab, which, I mean, I didn't build it. It never worked, but I tried.
Yeah.
I very much tried. And offered me a job at a repair shop. So, I showed up, and it was kind of like the owner was like, well, are you familiar with working on gear? Have you been inside a gear? And no, but I've soldered a lot of cables. Oh, so you can solder? Yeah. Can you solder me a cable? And I built a cable, and like, that's not how you solder. So yeah, I literally started from having to drop everything I knew, and as far as working on anything, and start from the beginning. And you give me 20 minutes. Say if you can figure it out in 20 minutes, fix it. If you can't, you're done. You move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And for months, I did not fix anything. So it was great. It was a really good learning experience. I had previously worked in recording studios, and I worked in a lot of video post when I was younger. So patch-based signal flow, felt great about all that. Been using large format recording consoles starting when I was 16. So that stuff I felt really good about. But then you get inside like an amp, or you get inside a power amp or a mixer, and everything got really weird for me. I was young at the time, and again, I had 20 minutes to figure it out, and most of the time I didn't. So started from the bottom.
Right. And so you do a lot of amp repair, even though I think you've told me that you don't want to do any more amp repair.
It's not that I don't want to. I actually really enjoy it. And it's one of those things where like, it's like chops. It's like, you know, practicing scales. It's doing double paradiddles until your hands fall off. It's chops. You got to do it. You got to do something. You know, you can't say you want to voice an amp to have a little bit of a late 50s GA40 flavor and not work on enough of them to know exactly how that sounds.
Right.
You know, I actually do enjoy doing a lot of amp repair and on a lot of different stuff. It's just that there's only one of me, and I'm really trying to do so much different stuff. And so when I look at how many hours there are in a week, I'm just trying to kind of pick things and put it in places that work. So I still do a lot of amp repair. I try and turn down stuff that I'm not overly excited about doing because I feel like it's just going to get lost. And I mean, I have a backlog of stuff I've been trying to get out for people. You know, I'm not immune to that like any other tech in the world, but yeah, it's not like a primary focus right now, I will admit.
And what about the, you know, the old school tape delays?
We definitely work on a lot of tape delays. That's kind of my like pay the bills business. Not to belittle it or anything like that. I love working on tape delays. We're getting a lot of them in. It's pretty rad actually. Did this whole thing with Echoplex over in Australia, and basically it's like a referral thing. You know, I do warranty work on his units if it needs to be done, which they never break down. You don't. I don't know why I'm warranty. Like I'll never have to fix one. But you know, he puts his U.S. All North American clientele over to me if they need anything on Space Echoes or Echoplexes. I'll do Benson Echorecs and clamped Dynacord German tape delays, kind of on like a special like case by case sort of basis. They're difficult, and sometimes you get into a situation with those types of things where people don't have the finances to put in just for parts alone to really make those things work right. So I'm kind of picky and choosy about that stuff, but Space Echoes and Echoplexes are like, I mean, we're putting out a lot of those every week.
Right.
So
that's great. Tell me a little bit more about this amp that I think you said that you're going to do another short run of.
Sorry, just let me drink some more of this delicious beer.
Do it.
So I think about 8 years ago, I did a production run. It was like 5 amps. You say production run, you think it's going to be like, I built 100 of these. No. I built 5, and that was difficult. All myself, so it is definitely time consuming. But so this amp was one of those that in the end I decided to keep, and it was the 5575. Great name. You know, and it was a really rad amp, and at the time, definitely the best thing that I did. Isaac Brock got one of those. You know, one of those things where it was kind of like a reimagining of how I build stuff at the time. And great amp. I really enjoyed making them, really enjoyed playing it. I revised that later and stripped some features down, but then kind of focused it more to do what it did well instead of trying to do too many things, and set it at 55 watts instead of the switchable 5575, which was the model before, and that was something I called the Lead 55. I only did a few of those, and that was the amp for me, at least before the combo amp. And I basically just took that, scaled it differently, and did some other stuff, and that was kind of the amps that I did for about a 4 or 5 year period. And now with this one, I'm basically going back to where I was with the Lead 55 and saying, okay, I've grown a lot as a player, as a person, designer. I'm doing a lot more stuff, transformers, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, I'm in a totally different place. And so I'm looking back at this thing and saying, this was a really great amp, but there was some stuff that I wasn't really able to realize on it. How can I do that? And I've talked about it for like a year and a half or 2 at this point. And I even had one guy who was just on a list, just waiting, you know, just let me know. And finally kind of getting around to it and saying, all right, where does this thing need to go? So now I'm doing all the things that I wanted to do with it that I couldn't necessarily do before out of either time constraints or just my knowledge base just didn't really allow for that to happen. And creating the perfect version of an amp I sort of already did, you know?
Right.
It's kind of an oddball thing, but you know, I'm coming back to something and saying I can do this better. And honestly, I'm so stoked on this thing. It just does so much. I can dial in so many different varieties of music. I can hear everything that I'm doing. I mean, how do you describe your own amp without sounding kind of dorky about it? It's a really, really fun amp to play,
Right.
and it does a lot of stuff, and it does everything it did before, just way better, and then does a whole bunch more stuff that just makes more sense to me and to some other people musically, you know.
Right. And is it going to stay around 55 watts?
Yes, it is 55 clean. It's over 100 in clip, actually. It's kind of brutal, but nowadays, I mean, like if you're not in kind of, I feel like in this realm, you're probably more in this realm anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I know me personally, I'm more of a 412 and head sort of player, but
I'm the same. I was 412 in head, and I bought a combo, and I'm like, it just didn't work for me.
mm-hmm.
So I stuck with that. So tell me a little bit about this. I think you had explained it to me before. You know, there's a lot of AB boxes out there, and I think this is definitely not a standard AB box.
No. It's kind of my take on, you know, everything. I take it way too far. So yeah, basically the concept with the phase linear distribution amplifier was, hey, there's a lot of ABYs out there. I've played a lot of them. My friends have played a lot of them. A lot of clients have played a lot of them. I've generally been pretty dissatisfied with any ABY I've ever played. That is something a lot of people have said to me as well. And I like 2-amp setups. I really get into that from a musical standpoint, just from like creativity, obviously having a wider footprint, but just, you know, more of everything. You know, it's great. You know, a lot of ABYs, you know, they have kind of the same stuff, you know, a ground lift, a phase correlation system of some sort. But again, like, you ever play an ABY and you're like, wow, it just doesn't sound like, you can hear it's in there, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like what it did before.
Right.
And that's what this thing was supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you just don't know it. It's there. And the idea is that when you buy that, you get a sound that you didn't have before, you know? The concept with it is, you know, when I was growing up working jobs in video post, you know, we all knew how to use a distribution amplifier. Go to a radio station. Do those exist anymore? Distribution amplifiers, that's how they split stuff. You want to split a signal and do it right, use a distribution amplifier, which is a pretty simple topology. It's usually, you know, an input buffer of some sort, a signal bus, and output sections that are isolating one out from the other. So the goal with this was to design something that functions like an ABY from a guitar player point of view, acts like a broadcast style distribution amplifier, and the quality, and more importantly than that, the phase linearity between the two outputs. Hence the phase linear part. It's right there. It says phase linear.
Very nice.
So, you know, from a functionality standpoint, it's got 2 outs. It's got an input. The 2 outs are the same as what the input is, just like any other ABY. You've got phase correlation capability on both outputs. So let's say, you know, you're using this for guitar, your bass player is playing, you can start with the main out, reference that one, flip your phase. You might like the sound of your guitar rig in phase with your bass player. You might like the sound of it when it's out of phase from your bass player, you know. You might poke out a little bit more when you're out of phase. Maybe you guys are tuned to drop F and it's better when you're in phase, you know what I mean? That's why there's a phase switch on the main out. Second out has a phase switch as well, which you can use to correlate to the first output, and then a ground lift as well. Again, similar functionality from other ABYs out there, but the idea was to do it in a way where it's better than what you've heard in the past.
Right.
Because again, we've all used ABYs that sometimes are kind of a bummer, to be nice about it. So the way that this thing is, both outputs are transformer isolated. I'm using transformers that I had made by Jensen that are a quad filar design that is, they're really, really quite good. And there's a remote system built into it too. And the idea with that was for like pedal looping setups, you know, like a gig rig or like a Boss ES series, like ES5, ES8, where you have patch setup going on. You can use those control outs and actually control your ABY with it. So you can have a patch that's, you know, you turn on your reverb and your delay and, you know, this other thing, and then mutes this one amp, and that's this sound. And then you hit, you know, another patch that's like 3 distortion pedals and both of your amps on at the same time or whatever. You know, that was the concept with that. Or, you know, a remote mute as well. You can mute both amps at the same time. And again, that runs off of 9 volts, just like the boost pedal, though it runs bipolar 16 inside.
Okay.
So a lot of power supply design went into that. A little too much power supply design went into that.
Nice. And so the big box version there?
Yeah, so this one was for Jeff Matz in High on Fire, and Matt Pike has one as well, though he doesn't like the soft switches. He likes the really hard ones because, I mean, he wears work boots on stage. So, and this functions purely as a distribution amplifier. So singular input, 5 outputs, and again, the main out is ground connected through, but still phase correlation capable. So, you know, Matt and Jeff can play on stage, and, you know, one of them can flip this and flip themselves in or out of phase with each other. Then all the rest of them have the same functionality. So they've got a phase switch as well, which again, they're going to reference to their main amp. And then they've got a ground lift as well, which, I mean, if you're running that many amps, you're probably going to ground lift them all anyway. And then these actually have a hard mute on them, which is what this X function is. And the idea being is that, you know, you set up a stage, you start, you mute every out, you've got your main out, you know, they can ring out, one of them flips this, hey, we're in, hey, we're out, hey, we like it in, okay, great. And then individually, they can bring 1 amp in, phase correlate it to their reference, mute it, bring 1 amp in, phase correlate it to their reference, mute it, so on and so forth. And when they're all done, turn them all on, and everyone in the venue is deaf. Which I just saw them, a couple months back in Portland, and Jeff was running this in like 5 bass amps with like different distortion pedals. It was awesome. It
crazy.
Was the gnarliest bass tone I have ever heard in my life. It was incredible. And I definitely had a smile because I was thinking about this.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. I think it was pretty awesome that you have a bar out front, Sessionable. It was great.
It's we're definitely spoiled a little bit by that one.
It's a pretty good selection.
Yeah, well, clean lines, so it's like every beer you drink there is better than any beer you'd get anywhere else.
True. I've had 2 there, and they're both great, and I think I had one last time I was here.
Yeah.
It's awesome. All right, so thank you again.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Beer and Gear Show is brought to you by Revelation Cable Company. Please like, subscribe, and comment below.